India's biggest tax dispute that involves British telecom major Vodafone is perhaps headed for a settlement, and it's a win-win for both the government and the telecom giant. ET now learns that Vodafone has been asked to pay just the principal tax demand of about 8,000 crore rupees to settle the 8-year-long tax dispute. Remember, with interest and penalties, the total amount has now gone past the 20,000 crore rupee mark.
The offer will now be discussed by Vodafone's board of directors, while the company will also seek its shareholders' nod before taking a final call. As part of the settlement offer, the government will drop the transfer pricing case against Vodafone. A settlement will also mean the end of arbitration process between the two parties. Clearly, the government wants to send out the message to foreign investors that the days of tax terrorism are indeed over. The mega Vodafone exclusive, that's our top story on Business Tonight.
Let's get you a perspective, and we're joined by Rajesh Simhan, who's Head of International Tax from Nishith Desai Associates. Thanks very much, Mr. Simhan, for being with us. The Vodafone tax case has really stuck out like a sore thumb, and there have been positive talks from the government on one hand, a lot of grandstanding also at different points in time from both sides. It's been an albatross of sorts as far as Vodafone is concerned. What do you make of the potential settlement offer that has been made? Pay up principle, forget the rest. Do you think it's fair and perhaps also a feasible offer that could go through?
I don't necessarily think that this is a move which will actually find acceptance, because the fact of the matter is that even till date there is a lot of other disputes also which are there. All of them are pretty much taking the same stance that there is no tax that is payable. All of us are aware that there are multiple issues as to even as far as the taxability is concerned, whether you look at it from a bilateral investment protection agreement perspective or from a constitutionality perspective. So I don't know whether this move by the government, while obviously it's great to see that they have come in onto the table, but I don't necessarily think that this is something which will sort of end as quickly, considering the kind of proposals that are there on the table.
Rajesh, there is, of course, a bilateral investment protection treaty. And according to the UK treaty, if you invoke arbitration, both parties have 6 months to attempt a settlement. We understand there's just 1 more month left. So clearly, time's running out. If the deadlock's still not broken, do you think this will be yet another opportunity missed?
Again, the challenge that is there is that you've already lost 5 months. Whether you can get a resolution done and dusted in 1 month is anybody's guess, but obviously it is sort of tough. There is a lot of incentive for both the government and also for Vodafone to sort of put it behind and move forward, but for that you need to have a proposal that is concrete enough, which is probably acceptable. Again, with these timelines, it's probably tough to sort of come into a resolution. In terms of has the government really missed a golden opportunity? The fact is, after the new government has come in, we've had close to 18 months. Everybody knows that this issue is hanging in the air. I don't see this being resolved as easy in the next month. I think this will sort of, it will be a painful process. I think it's going to take a lot more time, because what you need to keep in mind is that even from the government's perspective, the issue here is that today Vodafone is just one of the many cases that are there as far as the indirect transfer provisions are concerned. This is not the only arbitration which is there. You have other arbitrations also which have been invoked on similar grounds. So I think from that perspective, even for the government to take a one-off approach with each of the parties gets a bit difficult. So let me put it this way, I don't think the government is in a great place right now as far as resolution is concerned.
Okay, but do you foresee, Rajesh, any potential hurdles for the government when it comes to waiving off interest and penalty if it were to do that in the case of just one company? What about other cases? Does the IT Act allow the government to make such an exception for one company?
So it's not just about the act, right? Because ultimately this is a settlement that you're doing under a investment treaty, because you're no longer potentially within the framework of the act, because what the government is really doing is trying to exercise its executive power as far as resolution of a dispute is concerned, and it is not necessarily a waiver of an interest under a tax statute. So I think that's the distinction that you need to make, that you're now looking at it as an investment dispute and not necessarily as a tax dispute as far as resolution is concerned. So it's essentially, and when you're talking about a settlement or a conciliation talk, that's really where the government is saying that, okay, this is the amount that we are willing to sort of settle on. So I wouldn't necessarily foresee a issue as far as the government is concerned, as long as you make the distinction clear that you're trying to resolve a dispute in exercise of your executive power and not really waiving penalties or interest under the provisions of the Income Tax Act, for which there are no real provisions which may necessarily be there, because you cannot, as you pointed out, you cannot do it for one person.
All right, Rajesh, very quickly before we let you go, I mean, let's presume for a minute that they will be able to smoke this peace pipe. You're not all that hopeful, but if they do, they will perhaps put an end to that 8-year-long tax tussle. What kind of an impact do you expect on other pending tax cases, say, for instance, the one with Kane?
So one is that sort of gives a path for the government and also a framework within which it can really undertake any settlement or conciliation talks vis-a-vis the other parties. There are both upsides and downsides to it. The upside is that you already have a ready framework. The downside is that the government is sort of, its hands are tied, because for it to sort of take a completely divergent stance then starts getting questioned. So there's a bit of and which is where my broader point was that even from the government's perspective, how do they really look at it, saying that we are going to go and look at it as a single individual case when you already have multiple other disputes that are there. So which is where even my earlier comment that the government's not really in a great place, because ultimately a bilateral talks or settlement sort of still leaves you open on the other proceedings that are there, even in respect of other parties.
Rajesh Simhan from Nishith Desai, thanks for joining in with that perspective on that big story, the Mega ET exclusive this Wednesday evening.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.